Like, I just don't know where to start. Hello, beautiful best friends. How are you going? You're looking absolutely stunning as usual. Thank you so much for joining me back in our tiny, safe little space of the big, scary internet. All 5,000 of you. Yes, there are now just over 5,000 of us, which is just absolutely mind-blowingly insane. I cannot even deal. Thank you so, so much for all of your support, best friends. This is such a big milestone, and I'm just so grateful for every single one of you. Here is to a million more hangouts for us. Yay, us. If you're staring at my brows right now, then please stop. Don't worry. I am fully aware that my brow game is like violently strong today. I just had them touched up a couple of days ago, so I know they're looking very dark and shiny and very Oscar the Grouch-esque, and I tried to even it out with the lip color, but that was the wrong decision. I feel like I should have just accepted it was a lost cause. I mean, hopefully they're not too distracting. If you are new here, then hi, my name is Liz. My brows don't usually look like this, and I'm so glad that you and I randomly stumbled into each other today. Well, you, me, and my beautiful guest star, Lily, who joins us in every video because she hates being locked out of the room while I record because she's a little bit anxious and codependent, aren't you? But I mean, aren't we all? Are you going to stay here for the whole video? Hey? Mwah, 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 mwah. Careful of the brows. She also gives us really good emotional support breaks when things get too intense, so you're welcome. So today I have another Australian case for you guys. I know you've been enjoying the Aussie cases, me too, but technically this is not a true crime case because there were charges initially, but they were all dropped. So we're taking a break from the true crime this week, which, I mean, pat on the back, great self-care choice, great for our mental health, or at least it would be if this case wasn't so incredibly intense. Thankfully, as wild as today's story is, no one was hurt, which, I mean, by the time we're done here today, I think we will all agree is a goddamn miracle. Today, collectively, as a group, we are going on a wild ride with the Tromp family. No, not the Trump family, although I'm sure that would be a pretty wild ride too. But no, today we are talking about the Tromp family. And trust me when I tell you this is a very bizarre case, but at the same time, I want to be as respectful to these people as possible because these are real people. And thankfully, they did make it through this experience together physically unharmed. But I can only imagine how incredibly traumatic and scary everything that happened was for those involved. So this is just me telling their story as respectfully as possible. So let's dive in and go back in time to August 2016 to Silvan, which is a small town about a 45-minute drive southeast of Melbourne, Victoria. At the time, Silvan had a teensy tiny population of about 1,200 residents, and amongst these residents were the Tromp family, made up by the 51-year-old Mark, his 53-year-old wife, Jacoba, who was known as Kobe, and the couple's 3 adult children, 29-year-old Rihanna, 25-year-old Mitchell, and 22-year-old Ella. And Mark and Kobe, as well as running their own earth-moving business, they also ran their own red currant farm in Silvan. And both of these businesses were very successful and well-established. They even ran these pick-your-own-currant days on the regular for like visitors and tourists on the farm. And as well as Mark and Kobe themselves, 2 of the 3 Tromp children lived on the farm in the family home, and all 3 of the children worked on the farm in one aspect or another 7 days a week. So it was really a family-run business. But on Tuesday, the 30th of August 2016, police had been called out to the Tromp family farm following a report that they had received that afternoon that Mark and Kobe had gone missing. And when police arrived at the home to suss things out, they immediately found a couple of things that probably would have left them a little bit unsettled. For instance, all of the vehicles parked at the home were unlocked with the keys in the ignition, which, like, I guess I'm a city girl, but I guess it's normal enough for a farm in a small town, right? But when police went to access the home itself, they found that both the front door and the rear door had been left unlocked as well. Like, some reports say that these doors were just left wide open. And looking around, officers quickly realized that it wasn't just Mark and Kobe that were missing, but their children as well, Rihanna, Mitchell, and Ella, as well as Ella's silver Peugeot SUV. Inside the home, there weren't any signs of a struggle or anything, but things were definitely off and were setting off red flags for officers immediately. Like, the home was in a state of disarray with just piles and piles of business documents and bank statements related to the finances for the family farm, just kind of scattered around all over the place in a state of organized chaos, as though someone had been desperately searching through all of this paperwork for something. And we're not talking like this person was thinking, oh, I need to check that transaction from the last week or two. No, these documents spanned years back. Like, they were on a mission. It's unclear what the family had taken with them, like if they had packed any clothes or any other luggage before they left. But what was important was what they had left behind, because continuing their search of the house, police found all of the family members' bank cards, their passports, and their mobile phones. And the general impression that police were forming was that the Tromp family hadn't just all leisurely hopped into Ella's car and driven off on some random road trip. It was more like they had fled that home in a state of total panic, wanting to escape and go off the grid with no phones or paper trails that anyone would be able to track them with. And as it would turn out, police were 100% right. Over the course of a few weeks leading up to their disappearance, it would be said that there had been this sort of pressure building up within the Tromp family. And people that knew the family said that both Mark and Kobe had become increasingly fearful and even confided in those close to them that they believed there was someone after their family that wanted to kill them and get their money. And things reached a boiling point the day before the police turned up at the home, when Mark told his family that they were in grave danger and needed to leave immediately. And the original plan had been for them to all hop on a plane and fly overseas, but the family had changed their minds, feeling that this was way too dangerous because they might be tracked by their passports. So instead, they decided that they would be better off going somewhere where technology couldn't reach them. And so on Monday, the 29th of August, the entire Tromp family left behind their phones, passports, and bank cards, packed themselves into Ella's Peugeot SUV and fled their home, headed north. And they went a whole long way. Like, if you add up all of the road that these guys would cover in the days that would follow, it comes to over 3,000 kilometers, or roughly 1,800 miles. That's a lot. Once the family fled the farm and were on the road, it would be just 30 minutes before they discovered that one of them had a secret. Mitchell had snuck his mobile phone into the car. Yeah, out of all of the 5 family members, Mitchell was the only one that wasn't swept up in this state of total panic that everyone else was caught up in. He didn't believe that they were in any danger at all, and he had just tagged along to make sure that no one got hurt. Because even if his family wasn't being hunted down like his parents claimed, there was obviously something going on, and he didn't want anyone getting hurt. But can you imagine Mark and Kobe's reaction when they realized that Mitchell had his phone on him? Like, God damn it, Mitchell. We've gone to all of this effort to leave everything behind to make sure that these guys can't trace us, and you brought your phone. Are you straight up trying to get us killed, Mitchell? I don't know. I've thought about this part of the case a lot, and that's just how I picture this whole scenario going down every time. Anyway, once Mark and Kobe realized that Mitchell had his phone on him, they made him chuck it out the window as they drove, because they were that convinced that whoever was after them would be able to use it to track them down. From the family farm in Silvan, the Tromps drove throughout the whole day and the night across the state line into New South Wales to a town called Bathurst, just west of Sydney. This was a 770-kilometre journey that would have taken almost 9 hours without stopping. But at about about 7 a.m., despite tagging along all of this way, once the family was just outside of Bathurst, Mitchell was like, yeah, sorry guys, I am out. Mitchell said that on the way to Bathurst, he had just grown increasingly frustrated at his parents who were getting more and more paranoid and delusional. And so he had had enough and he split off from the group, and with no car or any other mode of transport, he started the long journey home to Silvan, which would involve having to get to Sydney somehow and then catching a bunch of connecting trains home. So this left Mark and Kobe and Rihanna and Ella to continue together on this mad, panicked road trip. And from Bathurst, the four of them headed to a popular tourist destination closer to Sydney called the Jenolan Caves. And everyone just kind of glosses over this. Like, yeah, so they left the farm, then they went to Bathurst, then they went to the caves. And then this is what happened next. Like, you're telling me this family on the run, terrified that they were being hunted down and that their lives were on the line, they head to these caves and no one is like, wow, that's a odd decision. Like, did the Tromps even know that the caves existed before that day? Was that where they were headed this whole time? Or did they just pick up some random pamphlet about the caves in a tourist centre in Bathurst and think, no one will find us there? What was the plan when they got to these caves? Were they just thinking that they would be out of the reach of technology there like they wanted? Were they planning on hiding out in these caves? And if so, for how long? Admittedly, if I'm honest, probably the reason I got so caught up on these caves is because caves kind of creep me out. Like, they trigger my claustrophobia, and I've seen way too many scary movies where people get lost or trapped in caves, or even worse, like that movie, The Descent from 2005. Like, if you like horror, it's a good movie. It's definitely worth seeing, but like, good luck ever enjoying just a nice leisurely tour through a cave ever again. So I looked up these caves. You know I did. And it turns out that the Jenolan Caves are actually probably the coolest caves in the entire world, or at least the very oldest caves that have ever been discovered by mankind, according to a study in 2006, which estimated this system of caves to be just a casual, rough 340 million years old. And good Lord, as if I wasn't already creeped out by caves enough, I also learned that all of this time, the Jenolan Caves have been changing and moving around. You know, like how the Earth's tectonic plates move over time? Yeah, without getting too crazy scientific, caves also change and evolve due to things like weathering, erosion, pressure from buildup of gases. Terrifying stuff. And then I learned about all the unexplained phenomena and strange sightings that have occurred over the years in the Jenolan Caves, like a whole tour group of people hearing children laughing and running around. Apparently, people have also heard a woman screaming in one cave, even though everyone in the caves is accounted for and present in another cave. And it's also commonly accepted amongst the cave tour guides that there is this one particular ghost of a man that used to work at the caves 50 odd years ago that will just randomly tap them on the shoulder or tag along on the ghost tours. So yeah, caves are fun, right? Hey, Lily, are you scared of caves too? I'll never take you into a cave, okay? It's okay. Do you believe in ghosts? But tangent over, thank you for bearing with me. I don't think that any of this played into the Trumps' decision to head to the Jenolan Caves, but I could believe that if they really thought that they were being chased and in grave danger, then the caves could have seemed like the perfect place to hide out. And although the caves are a popular tourist spot, there's not usually tours on during the week. So it would have been pretty quiet on a Tuesday when they rocked up there, and there wouldn't have been a lot of people around. However, now it seemed that it was Rihanna and Ella that were not on board with whatever the plan was at those caves, because this was when the two sisters split off from the group, just as Mitchell had done earlier. And they did this by stealing a car that was parked at the caves and hightailing it out of there to a town 2 hours south called Goulburn. And once there, the sisters reported their parents as missing to the police. Yeah, this was the report that prompted the Victorian police to go and check on the Tromp family home in Silvan in the first place. But clearly there was stuff going on between Rihanna and Ella now, and there must have been a disagreement of some kind, because they decided to split ways at a petrol station in town. And it seems like at this point, the panic that had taken over the family had officially worn off for Ella, because she said that she just wanted to go home and feed her horses. Like, that's all she cared about. And so she drove off in that car that she and Rihanna had stolen at the caves and made the 7-hour odd journey back home to Silvan, where she was greeted that night by the police still at the scene at the family home, which I imagine was a little bit awkward. Ella rocking up like, "Oh, hi guys, I'm back." Mitchell, meanwhile, even though he had been the first to split off from the group, he hadn't stolen a car. Like, he had to catch a whole bunch of trains back home, and he didn't arrive until the following morning on Wednesday. And I'm sure now police were like, fantastic, these guys will be able to tell us what on earth is going on and where the rest of the family is. But Mitchell and Ella had no answers for them. They could not explain what had happened. And even though Mitchell and Ella seemed to be the least affected by this sense of crisis and panic that had taken over their parents and caused them to flee, it sounds like they were both just absolutely shell-shocked and still trying to process everything that had gone on. Rihanna, on the other hand, the elder sister, she had definitely been affected by what was going on with Mark and Kobe. And when she and Ella parted ways at that petrol station in Goulburn, Rihanna had actually snuck into the back of some poor, unsuspecting guy's ute, otherwise known as a utility vehicle for my non-Aussie besties, as it was parked in this petrol station. Like, she just opened the door, jumped in the back seat and hid. And the way that the guy, his name was Keith Whitaker, the way he would later describe this experience was nothing short of horror movie material. Oh, it just started raining really heavily. How appropriate. Keith said that he had been driving for about an hour when all of a sudden he started feeling these kicks at the back of his seat. And so he looked back and saw Rihanna lying there across the floor in the back seat. And to Keith's credit, once he got over his initial shock, he pulled over and checked if Rihanna was okay, asked her if she was injured, offered her some water, all of that kind of thing. But Rihanna was in what Keith would later describe as a catatonic state. She said she didn't know her name, where she was, or what was going on. And so Keith called the police, and he said that in the hour that he sat there with Rihanna waiting for them, she pretty much just sat staring into blank space, saying nothing at all. Like, she was in a bad state. When police arrived, they transported Rihanna to Goulburn Hospital, where she was admitted to the psychiatric ward to receive treatment for what was reported as a stress-related illness. And Keith said that when they parted ways, Rihanna was really grateful and offered him $50 cash for his assistance and making sure that she was safe, which Keith turned down. But how freaking nice does Keith sound? And then there were two. All of the Tromp kids were safe and sound, leaving just Mark and Kobe still on the run, still missing, and potentially in danger. And when police spoke with Mitchell and Ella, they searched the Jenolan Caves, but they found no sign of Mark and Kobe because Mark and Kobe weren't at the caves anymore. They had driven back south across the state line to a Victorian town called Wangaratta. So they've driven all of that way north, and now they're doubling back all of this way. We're talking a 580 kilometer, 6 hour and a half drive back south. So clearly whatever the plan had been at the caves, we'll never know. It didn't pan out. But then Mark and Kobe split ways from each other in Wangaratta. We don't know why. Maybe they had an argument, or maybe they thought they would be harder to trace if they split up. It's all a mystery. Hey, I know, it's all pretty crazy, isn't it? Yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy. Are you all right? Yeah, you just giving us a breather? Thank you. It's okay. You can go get some more beauty rest. So Kobe, oh my God, Kobe, she got on public transport and traveled for what would have been a 5 or 6 hour journey back in the direction of the caves to a town called Yass. We're talking 350 kilometers, nearly 220 miles back up north. And once there, Kobe attempted to check into a motel in town. But I mean, she didn't have a credit card or any ID on her at all because she had left it all at home. And Kobe was in in what was described as a very agitated state. Some reports say that she was found just randomly roaming the streets, and others say that it was a kind member of the general public that witnessed her trying to check into this motel and realized that she was in a bad state and that she needed assistance. And this person took her to the hospital, where the staff instantly recognized her and called the police, because by now there was a huge amount of attention from the media and the public on this case. And from there, thankfully, Kobe was transported to Goulburn Hospital to be reunited with Rihanna and also receive treatment. So now it was just Mark, still on the run, still missing. And it was on Wednesday evening, that same day that Kobe and Rihanna were found and reunited with one another, that Mark made his presence known back in Wangaratta in yet another terrifying horror movie worthy moment. So at about 10 p.m. that night, a couple were driving around Wangaratta playing Pokemon Go, because it was 2016. You guys remember Pokemon Go, right? I was never really into it myself, but my husband was. And I remember everywhere we went, he was trying to catch these Pokemon things like it was an Olympic sport. And in Wangaratta, a small town in Australia with not a whole lot going on, I mean, what else would a young couple be doing at 10 p.m. in 2016, right? So they were driving around trying to catch them all when all of a sudden they started getting tailgated by a silver Peugeot SUV. Yeah, Ella's car that the family had all piled into in the first place. And of course, it's Mark behind the wheel. And the couple said that Mark was driving so closely and aggressively behind them that the guy couldn't even see Mark's headlights in his rear vision mirror. And I don't know what Mark's deal was here. Obviously, he was in, we don't know what his frame of mind was, but he was supposed to be running away, not chasing people. But obviously, something had set him off. And eventually, the couple was so freaked out that they pulled over, hoping that Mark would just continue on his way and leave them alone. But instead, Mark pulled over as well, and he exited the car and just outright charged at their car before he stopped dead in the middle of the road, standing there dead still, death staring them for an entire minute before just casually turning away and walking into this big park nearby called Merriwa Park. And he vanished into thin air, leaving behind Ella's car abandoned at the scene with the keys still in the ignition. So the couple, of course, called the police, who connected the dots and assumed that the man was Mark. And they immediately did a search of Merriwa Park, but there was no sign of him anywhere. They did also investigate a couple of break-ins in the area that night, though, one of them being an empty room in a motel, and there was no proof, but it was believed that Mark could have potentially stayed there in the room that night. The next morning, back home in Silvan, Mitchell and Ella made an appearance in front of the press, again saying that they had no real answers to offer about what had happened. They were still just baffled by the whole thing, but they pleaded with the public for assistance in locating their father, Mark, with Mitchell saying, quote, "I've never seen anyone like this or anyone conduct themselves in this way. I just really want my dad to be found. He's not dangerous. He's my mate, my father. I love him." But the following day, on Friday, Mark had still not been found, and there were quite serious concerns for his safety, because not only was he in what was believed to be a very unstable frame of mind, but there had been really heavy rain in Wangaratta in the last 24 hours, to the point where I believe there had been flooding in some areas, and Mark had last been seen walking into this big park with no means of shelter. And so when police received a report later that day about a man walking alongside a road near Bega carrying a one-man tent, they were hopeful, but after investigating this lead, it turned out that it hadn't been Mark. It wouldn't be until about 6 p.m. on Saturday evening, 6 days after the Tromp family fled their home, that Mark was finally found in good health but in quite an agitated state, running alongside a road near Wangaratta Airport. Mark was taken down to the police station, where he received a mental health assessment and was questioned by police for a good 5 or so hours before he was released into the care of his brother, who coincidentally was a police officer. And as Mark and his brother pulled out of the station, their car was kind of swamped by the press waiting out the front, taking pictures and all of that. And there's this iconic footage of Mark flipping them off as they drive off. But Mark later apologized for this and the, quote, hurt and concern caused by these events, unquote. Mitchell and Ella gave an interview the following day thanking thanking police and the media and the public for all of their efforts spent helping relocate their father and bring him home safely. But once again, they didn't really have any answers about what had happened. It was almost like they were just as perplexed and baffled as the rest of Australia, because once everyone was safe and accounted for, pretty much the entire country were just like waiting for an explanation for everything that had happened. There were a lot of theories thrown around, of course, and some of them were pretty bizarre, but this had been a pretty bizarre road trip, so a lot of them really were quite conceivable. Like, even the lead officer on the case, who was actually familiar with the family themselves, said that this was the most bizarre case he had seen in 30 years. However, in the investigation following the family's safe return, these theories were slowly ruled out one by one. Police went through all of the finances for both the family's businesses, the red currant farm and the earth-moving business, with a fine-tooth comb, and they found no massive debts that might have set Mark and Kobe running, because both of the businesses were very successful. There were also no signs of dodgy business dealings going on with any untoward individuals, no sign that anyone had threatened the family in any way or been after their money, just nothing that would suggest that the family had been in any danger at all. There was a lot of emphasis placed on all of the Tromps working and living together on this farm. The idea being that maybe there was something on the farm that the whole family had been exposed to and had caused them to all become paranoid and distressed to the point where they had just fled. But testing was completed at the farm. Like, there were people in hazmat suits going over everything, checking if maybe there had been something in the water supply, checking if there was maybe a chemical that was being used on the red currants that could have had an effect on the family's mental health. They even checked if maybe somehow there had been a buildup of carbon monoxide in the house, but everything was fine. There was nothing like that that was found. It was also a big theory for a while that maybe the Tromps, living on their own in a relatively isolated rural area, had been exposed to some kind of religion or cult, and somehow their beliefs had been the reason behind them fleeing the farm. But this was also ruled out, as were theories that the family had been using drugs. Also, none of the family members had any history of mental illness in the past. Like, the only lead up had been both Mark and Kobe sharing fears over their safety and saying that they felt like someone was after them. Meanwhile, while all of this speculating was going on, the Tromp family themselves were very clearly keen to put the whole thing behind them. Like, there were people that were waiting for them all to sit down together and give this big tell-all interview, or to maybe sell the rights to their story for movie or book deals, but none of this ever happened. Instead, they just kind of put their heads down and got back to work as usual. Like, the whole crazy experience had never happened, and they've kept a super low profile ever since, as is absolutely their right. They have their right to privacy, and they certainly don't owe anyone an explanation. Those charges that I mentioned at the beginning were against Ella and Rihanna for stealing the car at the caves, but the charges against Rihanna were pretty much immediately dismissed under the Mental Health Act we have here in Australia. And then in March 2017, police officially confirmed that the charges had also been dropped against Ella when they approached the owners of the car, and they were really understanding and agreed. And while, like I said, the family never did do a big tell-all interview or like a media tour or anything, Rihanna did give a brief interview in May 2017. And I'd say that this interview gives us the clearest insight into the whole incident. Rihanna said that her dad, Mark, had been going through quite a stressful period leading up to the event. And I mean, I think we can all agree that being a farmer must be incredibly stressful to begin with. And then Mark and Kobe also had the earth-moving business, and apparently they were also in the process of renovating the family home. So Rihanna suggested that all of this stress had built up and resulted in Mark having a mental breakdown and believing that the family was in danger. Of her experience, she said that the whole thing had been incredibly scary, and that she herself had also ended up believing that they were all in danger. And when she was asked about how they were all going now, Rihanna said, quote, "We are all happy, healthy, and just trying to get back on track again and get over everything that's happened. We are all very embarrassed, which I get, but at the same time, it just breaks my heart. The idea that Rihanna or any other of the family members, after going through what clearly would have been such a terrifying and traumatic experience, that they would feel embarrassed. But it's the statements that Rihanna made in this interview that lead us to what is probably the most widely believed and accepted theory in the case. Folie à deux. As much as I've been practicing pronouncing that all of this week, just walking around randomly going, folie à deux, folie à deux, folie à deux, do. I still feel like it was a swing and a miss, and I apologize to any French speakers out there, but please just be prepared to cringe some more as I stumble my way through this. Anyway, folie à deux. Folie à deux is a French term that translates to folly of two or madness of two. And some of you might have already heard of this condition. You might even admit that you've experienced something similar, albeit on a much less grand scale than what the Tromp family potentially did. The term was coined back in the 19th century for the first ever documented case of this condition, which is actually really fascinating. Basically, a married couple in their 30s named Michael and Margaret shared the same persecutory delusion that they were being targeted by unknown individuals who were repeatedly breaking in, spreading lint and dust around their home, and wearing down the soles of their shoes by wearing their shoes while they were prancing around spreading dust everywhere. And this rare condition, also known as shared psychosis or shared delusional disorder, doesn't always affect just two people. In fact, the most common cases are close-knit families who live in close proximity and are also socially or physically isolated or have little interaction with other people. And while the cause of this condition is unknown, usually the lead-up will involve one or more of the people affected dealing with a huge amount of stress or experiencing social isolation. More often than not, the delusion or delusions will start during a manic episode experienced by a dominant individual of the group, often referred to as the primary, and then the delusion will spread almost like an illness through the group to the secondaries. And once the secondaries also begin to believe the delusion, the group kind of fuel each other's delusions and paranoia and fears. Like the delusion that the group members suffer from are literally fed by the delusions of their fellow group members. And so the treatment for this condition is quite often to just separate the group, and the delusion and paranoia just kind of wear off because the group members no longer have each other's fears to feed off. And there's actually just 3 criteria that need to be met for a group of individuals to be diagnosed with folie à deux. Firstly, they must have a delusion that develops in the context of a close relationship with an individual with an already established delusion. So in this instance, the one with the established delusion most likely would have been Mark. Secondly, the delusion must be very similar or even identical to the one already established by the primary case. And thirdly, the delusion cannot be better explained by any other psychological disorder, mood disorder with psychological features, a direct result of physiological effects of substance abuse, or any general medication. And it does seem like all of these were ruled out, so I can definitely understand why this is a theory that most people are on board with. Other instances of folie à deux include actor Randy Quaid and his wife Evie Quaid, who made headlines when the couple, both facing a bunch of criminal charges for things like burglary, assault, and theft, applied for refugee status in Canada in 2010, claiming that they were being targeted by a group of star whackers who were following them, hacking their computers, and recording their phone calls. And Randy tearfully claimed in this press conference in Vancouver that this group were behind the deaths of Heath Ledger, Chris Penn, and David Carradine, and that they had also targeted other celebrities like Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, and Mel Gibson. Probably the most well-known instance of madness in the true crime world is the extremely disturbing case of the Swedish twin sisters, Ursula and Sabina Eriksson, who in May 2008, after being kicked off a bus in London for their strange and erratic behaviour, started running in and out of traffic on the M6, resulting in Ursula being hit by a truck and her legs being crushed. And while Ursula was being treated on the scene by police, Sabina then ran into traffic and got hit by a car. And this whole thing was caught on camera by this show that happened to be filming there at the time. And the two sisters, despite being severely injured, refused medical aid and were trying to run away from the police, screaming that they weren't real police and accusing them of trying to harvest their organs. Like, it was hectic, and it ended up taking 6 people to get Sabina into an ambulance, and then somehow Ursula eventually ended up in the ambulance as well, and they were both taken to hospital, where all of a sudden they were pretty cavalier towards each other and a whole lot calmer. And then while Ursula remained in hospital because both of her legs had been crushed, Sabina was taken into police custody before she was eventually released, pleading guilty to all of the charges against her. But she was not given a full psychiatric evaluation upon her release, because by now Sabina seemed totally normal and in control, and it was thought that the whole episode was over and done with. But it was said later that while she was in custody, Sabina had just casually turned around to one of the officers and said, "We say in Sweden that an accident rarely occurs alone. Usually at least one more follows. Maybe 2. And as it turned out, despite this calm demeanor that Sabina had managed to pull off all of this time, she was absolutely not okay. And the following evening, she killed a man named Glenn Hollinshead by stabbing him to death after he had invited her into his home because he took pity on her when he found her frantically searching the streets for her sister Ursula. And this is not the only documented instance where folie à deux has resulted in people being seriously hurt, or in horrific cases like this one, people dying, which is why if the Tromp family really were suffering from this condition and that's what led to their bizarre road trip, it really is a miracle that no one was hurt, because things could have seriously gone so much worse. But you guys know the deal. As usual, I would love to hear your take on this case. Had you heard of it before? Do you have a different theory? Have you had your own experience where you've been in a group situation and it's like a group panic scenario where everyone's fine, and then all of a sudden one person starts freaking out, and then out of nowhere, everyone else is freaking out as well? Because personally, I feel like I have had experiences similar to this, obviously on a much smaller scale. Like once when I was on a school camp, there was a group of us girls walking at night in the woods, which was creepy to begin with, and all of us were feeling it, but we were all fine. And then suddenly one girl screamed, and it was like that was all it took. Suddenly we were all screaming and all running through our lives through the woods back to the main camp area. And when we got there, the teacher was like, "What is wrong?" And none of us had an answer. Like, we were all so scared and hysterical, but none of us could explain it. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you can let me know by giving it a thumbs up. And if you are still sat there listening to me ramble away and you're not already subscribed, then I would just love if you did that, so that you, me, and Lily can hang out on the regular and do this all of the time and be best friends forever and ever, and like grow old and grey together. Like, that's just where I see this whole thing going. Lily, you want to come say bye? What did you think of the whole thing? It was pretty wild, wasn't it? You want to go explore some caves? You want to go explore some caves, hey? Would that be fun? It's not happening. No. Sorry. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and Lily today. We hope you have the best week ever, and we will be counting down the hours until we see you in the next one, where hopefully my brows will be a little bit more normal looking. Bye.